Hello, PolitiBrawlers. I'm Richie McGinnis. I'm here with Jake Berube and Matt Miller. We are discussing the leaks that obviously have taken Washington by storm. There's been a lot of partisan noise surrounding this whole issue. So what we're going to do is actually dive into what the leaks actually say and what the implications are for what that tells us about the Trump administration, what their view is on foreign policy, and let's dive right in. So, as you all well know, there was a little boo-boo in Washington this week. Some mistaken messages that were leaked to a reporter who doesn't like Trump very much. So I guess we can start off just begging the question of how this actually happened, and then we can get into what's actually in the leaks. So.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is the substance of the leaks, because right now you got the left just trying to score points and taking a victory lap and just kind of like shoving it in the right's face, and the right's trying to figure out damage control. But I haven't seen a lot of people talking about the implications on our foreign policy and the wider like ideas of the America First movement that can kind of be revealed from what they actually said in the content.
And what do you think that this was a mistake? Do you think it was a setup?
Well, it is interesting because it's like the guy who was added is like the most anti-Trump journalist in America. It was like a leading charge in the Russiagate stuff. I mean, if there was one person that you wouldn't want to add to this thread, it would be this guy. So it's like, it's a hell of a coincidence if it is one. But what do you think, Matt? Was it an accident or was he added on purpose?
I think it was
subterfuge or whatever.
I think it was an accident.
You think so? Okay.
You thought it was.
Yeah,
maybe...
I mean, I was just like, occasionally I'll text one of my buddies and I'll be like, "Love you, see you soon, honey," and it's like it's the last guy I texted, and it's an accident. It's obvious, so I can see how that sort of thing happens.
It's harder to do in Signal, though.
Yeah, but if it's like if that guy was the last person that any of those people in that thread was texting, that in and of itself is pretty damning coming from a Trump administration official. Like, why would he be in contact with him in the first place?
Yeah, and I mean, there is the screenshot that was published by The Atlantic that says that he was added to the chat by Michael Waltz.
Okay.
So the focus is on Michael Waltz.
I'm sure
right
Michael Waltz has the contact info of a lot of left-wing reporters, though, right? I mean, that's a congressman is going to be doing media hits, interviews. This might have been a contact that was obtained years ago, a decade ago. Like when we talked to Tim Burchett a couple of weeks ago, he was saying how he knows Jim Acosta personally way back in the day. So I don't think it's suspicious, in my opinion, that he had the contact info. Was this a setup? Maybe you could make the case that this was a setup up to the point where if you walk into a room and you're not supposed to be there and you decide to just take a seat in the back corner and not do anything, not exit the room that you're not supposed to be in, then yeah, maybe it was a setup on the Atlantic editor's part where he knew he was in the wrong place.
Yeah.
He should not have been there and he should have exited or not published it. I mean, who did the most damage, if there was any damage done to U.S. national security, was the guy publishing the contents of this classified discussion.
Yeah, but I mean, talk about a journalist's wet dream. He just gets added to a text thread. Like, I mean, you guys are journalists. Imagine Biden administration added you to some like juicy piece of journalistic it's a scoop, right? Like, no one's going to deny that.
He could say that he was added to it. He could show evidence of that and get his scoop and get his 15 minutes of fame like he's getting. But to actually go ahead and publish what was said, I think is the step that brings us into the realm of a dangerous implication. That was done on the journalist's part, not on anybody. Somebody made a mistake, yes, and that should not be downplayed. But that mistake didn't actually lead to a negative consequence. What could have led to somebody's life being on the line or a dangerous result is the journalist publishing what was being done to Yemen, what these classified officials were saying in the actual group chat.
A lot of this is going to come out eventually. I mean, like, just given the technology, they will be able to figure out who actually added him to the chain. Now, whether the public will be made privy to that information or if it's going to be classified, I guess we'll find out. But at least the administration will know who did it. So if it was done with ill intent or it was done by complete incompetence, accident, they will know. Now, whether they let us know they know is another story.
Well, the contents of the actual leaks, I think, are very illuminating as far as how these conversations go down, how the decisions are made. And so, regardless of, whether or not he should have published this, I do think that the public can glean a lot of information from, and I can just establish what was in the thread. So Michael Waltz opened it up by saying, team, establishing principles group for coordination on Houthis, particularly for over the next 72 hours. My deputy Alex Wong is pulling together a Tiger team, deputies agency staff level, yada, yada, yada. I think that the most interesting part came from JD Vance, who chimed in, said, team, I am out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake. 3% of US trade runs through Suez. That's the Suez Canal in Egypt. 40% of European trade does. There is a real risk the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, is to send a message. I'm not sure the president is aware of how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I'm willing to support consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself, but there is a strong argument for delaying this month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, et cetera. So that tells you a lot about how these conversations are going and what the America First policy looks like in action.
Yeah, it feels a little weird that it's like a group chat, like you're planning a golf outing or a barbecue with your boys and they're planning on bombing human beings. But I guess that's the way foreign policy is made. One of the reasons that I ultimately ended up being a Trump supporter was I felt like he would have a more restrained foreign policy, ending some of these forever wars. He was on your boy Tim Pool's show and he was criticizing Biden for doing exactly this, bombing Yemen. He said there's no need for it, but then it's kind of shocking just 2 weeks after. So Trump gave a pretty broad directive to open up the Suez Canal. And I guess that the broad majority of the people on this chain, with the only exception of JD Vance, had to come to the conclusion that that was bombing Yemen.
Yeah.
Now, JD Vance was the one dissenting voice in here saying, I don't think this is a good idea. He said it was a mistake, to be exact. But his reasons for it was because it was like kind of a free giveaway to Europe. So he said that only 3% of U.S. trade goes through the Suez and 40% of European trade. So ultimately, we're doing the defense work of Europe for this. And then he hates them being a free rider. I noticed that conspicuously missing from this is any concern for civilian casualties. But it's where we are right now in foreign policy.
Having lived in the Middle East, I'm well aware of the fact that, we've discussed this before. For every time that you bomb, accidentally kill a civilian, you're creating an entire family of terrorists there. Yeah. And so, Hegseth, so just to broaden the context here, Hegseth said, VP, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS important considerations, most of which are tough, how they play out, economy, Ukraine, peace, Gaza, et cetera. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is to say we should be focused on Biden failed and Iran funded. So he's, this is like an optics conversation here. Yes. Yeah. And like you said, the actual, where the rubber meets the road of like, what's this actually going to accomplish? Yeah. It seems to be kind of lost in this conversation.
Well, I hope there was some vigorous debate on whether or not this approach was strategically advantageous or not, but it's not. This is more of a messaging, like a marketing meeting. Like how are we going to message this?
Yeah.
It says a lot that, regardless of the rationale, the reasons that we're going to be given to the public were Iran and Biden failed. Mm-hmm. So those were the two things that JD Vance seemed to think that we needed to pin down in the messaging before doing this. But the rest of the thread thought the timing was right to do it now. So what do you think, Matt?
Well, I think that, maybe they discussed other details on a more secure platform.
Yeah, I hope so.
Like if all they talked about here was the marketing. I mean, I don't know. I think from the Trump administration's point of view, the biggest thing to reconcile here is the severity of this. Like, what is the actual damage that is done by this journalist appearing in this? I think it was a mistake, but it's a mistake without consequence, really. I mean, do we know
it was
that
a successful strike, for the record?
Yeah, successful strike.
This was reported on after the strike took place. So
no American soldiers killed in action. So everything. It's kind of like a learning experience, I think. I mean, these are people that are juggling a lot. I think if there was something that we could measure and say that was a bad result from this, then some head should have to roll. Yeah. But the left-wing media obviously is incentivized to make this as big and important as possible. Mm-hmm. And this journalist, like he said, is a total anti-Trumper.
Yeah.
He has a vendetta. He's personally has a personal hatred for Trump. So I'm trying to see where are the dead bodies other than the Houthis that were antagonizing European trade routes, but that was obviously the intended dead bodies here. You were saying that you think J.D. Vance was saying the right thing, but not for the right reasons, because he wasn't discussing the. I think that a lot of Trump's foreign policy comes from the practical discussion of we should be isolationist or not get involved where we don't belong because of the cost or because of it's not our problem, not necessarily because of a moral. That usually doesn't enter the conversation. Yeah. That's never been the reason why Trump didn't invade the Middle East or didn't start another war. It's been practical. It's been more of a calculated decision based on America's interest.
Yeah, and a lot of that was said without saying it in the text. So the fact that they said, we need to do work on the messaging, no one knows who the Houthis are, is pretty much saying there is absolutely no support within my base of the American people to do this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is true. Because, what do you think, how many Americans could pick out Houthis on a map? Much less Yemen or, understand why it is important for us to be bombing them when only 2% of our trade goes through the Suez Canal. It's also important to, they were not doing this during the Houthis were not bombing or attacking ships during the ceasefire, which just ended. So that's kind of another impetus to do this now, is because the ceasefire had ended and there was concern that they would start doing it again.
Yeah, the key for people at home to understand about what's going on over in the Middle East is the fact that the hegemony of the petrodollar is incredibly important to the United States economy, and this is a strategically important location where the Houthis are because of its entrance. It's the entrance into the Red Sea, which goes up into trade routes not only across the Suez Canal but also going into Israel. And so, we have allies in the region, specifically Saudi Arabia and Israel, who have a vested interest in tamping down the Houthis. The question is preserving the petrodollar at the cost of, American taxpayers basically funding these $1 million strikes, $1 million missiles, and obviously flying expensive planes? At what point do you draw the line?
Yeah, and I think that so much of the base, the America First MAGA movement, was on the back of this. We're not going to be doing these forever wars in other countries' interest. We're going to pay attention to, the 50 states and our interest.
But is this a forever war?
Biden, Trump the first time, we've been bombing Yemen for a while. We were on the side of the Saudis bombing Yemen. We were fueling their planes in the air and all that stuff. So this has been it's been a long-held tradition of American foreign policy to bomb the poorest country in the Middle East, which is Yemen. And it's very unclear, at least to the American people, it is admitted in this thread that we don't know why. And that just speaks to how removed foreign policy is from the will of the people. And I think that's something that, if there is a silver lining in this, it gives the American people a window in to see how these decisions are made, and they can voice their opinions on whether or not they want to go this direction.
Well, I think I want military experts to make decisions like this, and people who do have a deeper understanding of foreign policy than our democratic laymen, voting on this stuff. I think it's a lot to ask for a president to not do like missile strikes that are needed in contextually, it's reasonable to ask for a president not to start frivolous wars that are sustained conflicts where American blood and treasure and everything is poured and sacrificed into like a sustained conflict like the Iraq War or Vietnam. That's what I don't want to see. That's what Trump hasn't engaged in. But I think part of his avoidance of those has been being able to bomb ISIS in a very concise way and effectively, so that we don't have to get into these sustained conflicts.
Yeah, and I don't want to be overly critical because I feel like those instincts, those anti-war instincts are within the movement. And even, you saw J.D. Vance push back on this idea from the get-go, which, personally, I don't think was a good idea. And it definitely wasn't explained to the American people why we're doing it. So, we're gone. The times when Congress made decisions on whether or not we go to war, unfortunately, are past. Mm-hmm. So it's important for the people in the America First movement, the MAGA movement more broadly, to like voice dissent when it's needed, just so they know where their base is. So that's kind of why I think it's important that this comes up. And it's not coming up, as like you mentioned before. Everyone's just talking about the leak. And if it's embarrassing or not, or do we deny it, or do we defend it, or do we, it's the substance of what was actually said that I think is way more interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly, at least these conversations are being had. In the past, like, for example, with the Iraq War, the problem was that the intelligence that was coming out of this WMD narrative from the CIA, if you look back on that intelligence, it was basically catering to the policies of the White House. So that the concerning thing there is that our intelligence agencies were shaping their actual intelligence gathering around what the White House wanted to do in the Middle East. And so at least here, Trump, like you said, is deferring to his commanders and, not really pushing an agenda so much as having a conversation about it. So I guess that's the one positive thing you can take from this.
The other thing is there's a lot of emojis. Are men using emojis now? Is that a thing we're doing? Am I just old? Or
I think there's a lot of stuff that happens in the group chat that you want to stay in the group chat. Yeah. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case this time.
Yeah. No, a lot of looked like teenage girl emojis going around, but maybe that's just my personal opinion.
I think as people on the right, I think it's important for us to give the benefit of the doubt to the people who made a mistake. And as long as they correct it, I mean, this is a bad protocol. Signal is an encrypted app that's supposed to be designed for private conversations that people can't hack into. They can't. It's not as it's impenetrable in ways that like regular text message aren't. So if this was an approved of app for these sorts of conversations to be had over, maybe they need to rethink that protocol.
Yeah,
and I hope that that's happening.
And just from a housekeeping, like if you're in the administration, just housekeeping, you got to figure out how this happened, who did it, was it nefarious? Because I mean, the coincidence that the guy who got accidentally added happened to be the most anti-Trump journalist in America, I would look into that. I don't want to sound like I should be wearing a tinfoil hat, but it's a little suspicious, isn't it?
I think that's most journalists, though. I mean, if he blindly threw a dart, like it would have been, Jim Acosta or whoever. So I think there was a high chance that's why I believe it was an actual accident. But the left's out for blood. The corporate media is out for blood. They're trying to drum this up into the biggest thing ever. I think we just need to see it for what it is. It was a slip up, but nobody died, other than the Houthis.
Right. Yeah.
Well, what do you guys think out there? You guys let us know in the comments what you think of these leaks, what you think of the substance of the leaks, and what your theories are on it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.